Hello and good evening. Welcome to ITV News. This is Monday night's calendar.
And here are tonight's main stories.
Have a go hero. The robber on a crime spree stopped by the shop worker who'd been mopping the floor.
Lockdown as the avian flu ban is about to be lifted. Farmers welcome the relaxation in restrictions but are ready for change.
I'll need to think more about what I'm wearing, about my footwear, but essentially we're going into a different era of farming, I think, where we've got to really think about food safety.
Dog gone. The landlord's reluctant to rent with pets in tow. Some owners are struggling to find new accommodation.
And the 9-year-old boy who's become a food bank fundraiser for those struggling with the cost of living in Bradford. But first tonight, it's forced farmers out of business and seen millions of birds culled in the worst outbreak of avian flu on record. But tomorrow, the lockdown imposed by the government to tackle the pandemic is to be lifted.
While barns and chicken huts can open their doors once more, there are fears in the industry about the risk of future restrictions and the cost of compliance. Fraser Maud reports.
For this flock of 500 hens at Yoke Farm near Boroughbridge, life in the open air beckons at last. Since November last year, poultry farmers and egg producers like Ben Mosey have had to keep their birds indoors as part of the fight against the global pandemic of avian influenza. Now they're preparing for tomorrow, when the restrictions are lifted. It's good for animal welfare and means eggs can once again be marketed as free range. Ben's hens will have half an acre to roam about in, but offsetting the risk of infection has meant changes have had to be made at a cost.
Having bird flu and in such a high propensity last year, it's meant that we've restructured our whole farming activities. We've moved the position of our hens on our farm, which is an extra infrastructure cost that we've had. We've had to think about our customers and their safety. We've had to think about our future planning. So yeah, it's just had a very big toll really on this year.
Strict biosecurity measures will remain in place though, whether the poultry owners have a single bird or thousands.
Getting back to some kind of status quo is really important. The main message that we have for any poultry keepers at the moment is, although the housing order has been relaxed, the disease is still there. So keeping up your stringent biosecurity and remaining really vigilant is probably the best way to tackle disease at the moment.
Infection rates in wild birds have been falling, but are still high and are being closely monitored, particularly amongst coastal populations of seabirds like guillemots, gannets and puffins.
The avian influenza epidemic has been probably the worst thing we've seen hit wild birds in this country, far worse than things like foot and mouth ever had any sort of impact. So it really is going to be a case of seeing, as we get into the breeding season in particular for places like Flamborough Cliffs, what the impact will be on the seabirds, as we know that they are one of the species, sets of species that are most prone to being affected by this.
Back on the farm, as the hens wait to enjoy their freedom, the farm shop is looking forward to once more selling their higher welfare, higher value, free-range eggs. Fraser Maud, ITV News, Boroughbridge.
Next tonight, police have praised the courage of a shop worker who tackled a robber during a series of offences in Leeds. Marlon Stewart committed 13 crimes in about 20 minutes one evening in July last year, while wearing a balaclava and carrying what appeared to be a handgun.
When he arrived at the one-stop store in Roundhay, he pointed the pistol at a terrified member of staff. Niall Stranix, who'd been mopping the floor, decided to intervene, grabbing him in a headlock. Stewart lashed out, causing cuts to the 61-year-old's head, but Mr Stranix held on in an intense struggle and the pistol, which turned out to be plastic, started to break. Stewart was forced to flee the scene empty-handed.
The 37-year-old, who'd previously pleaded guilty to 13 robbery-related offences at Leeds Crown Court, was today given an extended sentence of 10 years and 4 months imprisonment with an extended licence period of 5 years. Well, next tonight, a man extradited from Pakistan over the murder of Bradford Police Constable Sharon Beshanivsky 18 years ago may have to wait until next year to go on trial. Piran Dissa Khan, who's 74, appeared at the Old Bailey by video link for a preliminary hearing.
The defendant is alleged to have played a part in the organisation of an armed robbery which led to the death of PC Beshinivsky. Katie Oscroft reports.
Well, this hearing lasted for just over half an hour, and for all of that time, Piran Dissa Khan listened via a video link from Belmarsh Prison on the other side of London. He didn't enter a plea to the charges against him that on the 18th of November 2005 he murdered PC Sharon Beshinivsky in Bradford. She'd only been in the West Yorkshire Force for 9 months when she died, and she was responding to reports of a robbery at a travel agent's in Morley Street in the city. Khan is also charged with robbery with 2 counts of possessing firearms with intent to endanger life. Now, in the 18 years since Sharon Beshinivsky was killed, 3 men have been sentenced to life for murder, another man sentenced to life for manslaughter, and a 5th man was sentenced to 20 years in prison for manslaughter. Now, Piran Dissa Khan, who was extradited from Pakistan last week, spoke only to confirm his name and his date of birth today. He was remanded in custody until the next hearing on the 14th of July. And the judge, the Recorder of London, Mark Craft, will decide whether that is to be held here or whether it will be held in a courtroom closer to where a policewoman was murdered 18 years ago. Katie Oscroft, ITV News at the Old Bailey in London.
OK, you're watching Monday night's calendar. Do stay with us because still to come on the programme this evening. Itchy, scratchy and sneezy hay fever season is back with us. We speak to an expert about coping with the symptoms.
And it's certainly feeling like spring is in the air over the next few days with settled weather to come. How long will it last? Well, I'll be back later on with a full weather forecast.
Now, many of us know that owning a pet is like having an extra member of the family. I know my cat certainly is. You don't have a pet, do you, Michael?
Afraid not, but, you know, give it a stroke on my behalf.
Imagine the heartache then of being separated from them simply because of where you live.
Yeah, that's the reality facing a growing number of pet owners who are finding it increasingly difficult to find a home to rent. In fact, the number of tenants actually having to give up their pets is up by nearly a quarter.
Now there are calls to give animal-loving renters better protections, as Catherine Walker reports.
Good girls.
Sarah and her 2 dogs are inseparable, but that meant after she sold her house, finding somewhere to rent in Cullingworth proved challenging.
I've applied for over 100 properties. The minute they see that you've got small dogs or dogs of any kind, you get turned away. My mental health was quite poor with the depression, but you just feel very dejected as well, and you feel like you're being penalised for loving the animals that you've got.
Having a pet has been shown to improve our mental and physical health. But the latest figures show there's been a 24% increase in people giving up their pets because of rental restrictions. 1 in 10 people wanting to hand over their dog now give housing as the main reason.
We're definitely seeing more pets being handed over because of problems with accommodation. We think it's to do with the cost of living crisis and people having to perhaps downsize and then struggling to find somewhere that's appropriate, that's pet friendly. It's very, very distressing. So we've called on the government to introduce better protection for responsible renters with pets.
Currently, landlords keen to avoid damage to their property can include no pet clauses in tenancy agreements. But the industry body says they do encourage owners to accept tenants with pets.
Some landlords believe that pets will cause damage to their property. Some landlords believe that it may cause a nuisance for neighbours. We would say that you should seriously consider accepting them, and you shouldn't be put off by the pet, especially if the property is able to take pets.
The government has already outlined plans to introduce better protection for tenants as part of its Renters Reform Bill. But until the Act makes its way through Parliament, it seems renting with a pet will continue to be a bone of contention. Catherine Walker, ITV News.
Oh, how could you refuse some of those faces at home? Although I can understand it from a landlord's point of view as well.
That's right.
Now, the ITV Evening News continues at 6:30. Here's a look at what's happening with Mary Nightingale.
Coming up in the programme, the row rages on over animal welfare at the Grand National. The horse's trainer blames protesters for the death of Hill 16 on Saturday, the third fatality over the three-day event. Also tonight, why the Prime Minister is under investigation by Parliament's standards watchdog.
Banau Brycheiniog, an old name for a new way to be.
And rebranding the Brecon Beacons, how the National Park is reclaiming its Welsh heritage. Well, do join me for those stories and more at 6:30.
Mary, thanks very much. Time for sport now, and a big night of football down at Elland Road.
Zero Accounting Software sponsors ITV Regional Sports Report.
Yes, Leeds United taking on Liverpool. A valuable 3 Premier League points at stake this evening. Chris Dawkes is down at Elland Road for us tonight. Chris, what can we expect?
Yeah, good evening, Michael. Well, it's a difficult one to predict, all being told. Leeds are blowing very hot and cold at the moment, a bit like the weather, you could say, I suppose. They beat Nottingham Forest down here a couple of weeks ago, but then lost heavily to Crystal Palace last Sunday. But then again, this hasn't been a vintage season for Liverpool either. This time last year, they were competing for 4 different trophies. This time now, well, they're at 3 cup competitions, and they're well off the pace in the Premier League title race as well. I suppose you could argue that the 3 points will be more valuable to Leeds United, especially if you look at the Premier League table as it currently stands. A win for Leeds will move Leeds above West Ham into 15th spot, but more importantly will move them 5 points above Nottingham Forest in the 3rd and final relegation place. Well, we spoke to a few fans earlier to ask them how they thought tonight's game would go. You come over from Norway, are you excited for the game?
Yes, it will be, we need points today. Definitely we need points today.
You think Leeds can win this?
I'm not very sure. I hope for 1 point, I have to say that. Because it's very close in the bottom of the table, so they need, every point they get, it will be nice.
Possibly a draw, never know. Fingers crossed.
Oh, it's going to be a tough one, isn't it? But you've got to have that optimism. You got that hope inside.
Well, Chris, it's looking increasingly likely that whatever happens with Leeds, we'll have at least one Premier League team next season.
Yeah, it's certainly looking that way, isn't it, Sally? Sheffield United well on course to clinch promotion from the Championship. On Saturday, the Blades put 4 past Cardiff at Bramall Lane to move 5 points clear of Luton in 3rd spot. They could increase that lead to 8 points if they win their game in hand against Bristol City tomorrow. Meanwhile, both Huddersfield and Rotherham are not out of relegation trouble after both were beaten on Saturday. It could well be a nervous end to the season for Terriers and Millers fans. And talking of tense season climaxes, well, it doesn't get much worse than in League One. Sheffield Wednesday are doing their best to blow their chance of automatic promotion. Defeat at Burton means it's now 1 win in 8 and they've slipped to 3rd. Barnsley will still fancy their chances of going up automatically after a comprehensive 5-1 thrashing of Forest Green. The Tykes 4 points off Ipswich in 2nd. Bradford City have hit form at just the right time in League Two. Their win at Rochdale stretched their unbeaten run to 11 and moved the Bantams to within 2 points of the automatic promotion places. Meanwhile, Mansfield are in a playoff spot after drawing at Grimsby, and Harrogate came back from 2-0 down to Doncaster to pick up what could prove to be a vital point in their battle against relegation. It's been quite a year for the Leeds Knights Ice Hockey Club after winning their NIHL National League title 3 weeks ago. Yesterday they beat the Raiders to win the playoffs and complete an impressive double for a team who only started up 4 years ago. Well, that's all from me for this evening from Elland Road, I should say, where tonight Leeds United could complete a double over Liverpool. Remember, they beat them back in October for the first time since 2001.
OK, Chris, at Elland Road, thank you.
Well, lots of sport to go out there, but away from that array of sports, how about paddleboarding? Something you fancy a go at, Michael?
Do you know what? I genuinely would love to do it. My sister and brother-in-law, big-time paddleboarders, out on the lochs in the Highlands of Scotland.
Beautiful.
Just absolutely fantastic.
You need a very good core strength, though, don't you?
Then that rules me out completely.
Well, it's becoming more and more popular, so much so that there's now a push to help beginners, perhaps like yourself, Michael, find a safe way of learning. We've sent James Webster along for a lesson.
Gliding along the water with perfect balance. Paddleboarders make it look so easy. In Wakefield, Sadie is an instructor at the Everyday Lifestyle School and loves the feeling of being on the water.
I started it because I was actually very ill and very thin, very underweight, amazingly enough. And it's helped to develop and redevelop all my muscles, rebuild my spine back up, put the weight back on, and you won't get me off the board. I'm on now for 210 days. The season started. Next time I come off my board will be the 30th of October.
Reflecting its growing popularity, Sport England has now given responsibility for paddleboarding jointly to Surfing England and British Canoeing.
We want people who go out and do stand-up paddleboarding are safe, and primarily that means that they know where to go to do it safely, they use the right equipment, they wear buoyancy aids, and if they go for instruction they go to people who know what they're doing, and so people who've got the right qualifications, the right experience to be able to make sure that they do it safely and have fun doing it.
Which is why I've booked myself some tuition.
First position, we'll just knelt down like this.
So, how easy is it for a beginner to try?
But I guess the main focus today is to just introduce you to paddleboarding, keep you nice and safe and try and keep you dry.
Here on the Leeds-Liverpool Canal in Rodley, I started by learning that balancing on your knees is easier than standing up straight away.
There's no better feeling than doing a session with someone and knowing that they're going to be safe in the future. And that they've got another sport, a recreational sport to do outdoors, another form of exercise.
Jazz and his mum run sessions throughout Yorkshire for people who've never tried the sport.
My eldest paddler is 86 years old and she paddleboards, and she started as a referral through COVID for social prescriptions. It's the same as going for a walk or cycling, but whereas they can impact people with some of the physical aspects of it, being on the water doesn't do that. So that's why you've got so many people going to it now.
Take your time, I've got you.
Despite a few wobbles, I was determined to find my feet. Sadly, my lack of steering meant I was heading straight for a canal boat.
Get ready to drop to your knee.
That was my first session. I felt a bit wobbly. How did you think I did?
I think you did really well, mate. I think it's windy conditions today. You're dry, that's the main thing.
Oh, man.
I got you. Remember where I said where you look is where you go, so look forward, stare at that bridge, I've got you.
You look like you paddled well. How do you feel?
I enjoyed it.
Yeah?
I think I'd definitely have another go.
Yeah, well, I think if you can do it on a day like today, when it gets to June, July, August, be easy peasy.
Now the sport has two governing bodies. Standards for tuition like this will be established, along with safety messages, all designed to help more people like me to enjoy paddleboarding for the first time. James Webster, ITV News, Leeds.
Well, do you think you could do better than James?
I'd like to think I could do a bit better than that. I'm slightly worried about his driving skills, to be honest. Now, to the story of one selfless 9-year-old from Bradford who set up his own food bank to help people in his home city struggling with the rising cost of living.
Yes, Travis Robinson's been documenting his charity work, which he does with his dad, to hundreds of supporters on social media. His valiant efforts have even seen him invited to one community kitchen to help cook meals for those in need.
Well, Travis started his work after donating money to a homeless person, which inspired him to help others. He's been talking to Matt Price.
Yes, I think we've got something of a budding Bradford baker come charity superstar over here. This is 9-year-old Travis, who's busy making, I think, a coffee cake in there for people who are less fortunate. And it's all because you've got this food bank that you've set up and came about after you met somebody quite special, didn't you? Tell me a bit about that.
So, me and my dad were coming back home and we decided to go to the supermarket. Next to the supermarket doors, we saw this homeless person. So I asked my dad, can I please have some money? He thankfully said yes and gave me the money. So I'm walking up to the homeless man and he's holding his cup like this. So I put in my money and he says, I can have my tea tonight. Thank you so much.
I bet that made you feel really good.
It made me feel great about myself.
So you wanted to set this food bank up. What's it like helping people? What do you like about it?
It just makes you feel like you're one of the best people in the world, really.
Fantastic. Well, you are. You're doing a brilliant job. You better go and help your dad with some of the packing because he's got loads of work to do. Travis documents all his charity work, his food bank work on social media. He does little video diaries and hundreds of people are following those, checking in with him every day. He's somehow managed to rope Dad Craig into all of this as well. Craig, thanks for talking to us. You must be so proud of what he's doing.
Yeah, I'm very proud of him. You know, he's doing a fantastic job. He is. I'm really proud of him, yeah.
And so many people are having to rely on food banks because of the cost of living crisis.
Yeah, like you say, the cost of living's gone through the roof, so everybody's struggling and everybody needs help, you know, and we're trying to do that, aren't we, son?
Yeah.
Fantastic. And I also understand that you're helping, or going to be helping, at a food kitchen, a community kitchen as well. Are you looking forward to that?
Yeah, I am.
You good at cooking? I think we'll find out, won't we? We'll find out.
I'm all right.
Thank you very much for talking to us, both of us. You're doing an amazing job. The family's pretty used to fundraising. During COVID, they were raising money for Marie Curie, which is the charity that Travis's mum works for. And by the look of all of this that's got to be packed away into boxes and sent off, I don't think they show any sign of slowing down yet, do you?
I'm sure he's not going to slow down. He's going to go and go, isn't he?
Certainly not. He certainly is. What an absolute star.
Now, Kerry's not with us today, she's back tomorrow, but she's not been slacking. You may remember last week, Kerry reminded us all about tree pollen, and anyone with hay fever will be well aware of the scratchy throat and runny nose when spring and summer come along.
Well, is there a way to cope to avoid some of those annoying symptoms? Kerry's been finding out.
Hay fever can turn spring sunshine into a sneezy, nose-tickling, eye-watering day. At least 1 in 5 people in the UK experience hay fever symptoms, and about 95% of those are allergic to grass pollen. The science of pollen distribution can be complex.
The perfect weather conditions for pollen to be released off the plants is a dry, warm, sunny day with a gentle breeze. On days like that, the pollen is released in the early morning, it's carried up in the atmosphere as the air warms, and then it can often go very high during the middle of the day when the counts will be quite low, and then as the air cools again in the evening, that pollen will drop down again and come to the level in the atmosphere that we're breathing it in.
The pollen season can run from as early as January to as late as October. There are 3 types of pollen: tree, grass and weed. Most people are allergic to just one type, but some are sensitive to all 3. So what can we do to help alleviate the symptoms?
See, you can't lock yourself away during the season completely, so taking your antihistamines or whatever medication you prefer, taking it in advance of the stimulus is the best way to avoid reacting, because if you take it before, then you're going to have a reduced effect. Maybe don't hang your washing out during those peak times. Give your dog a brush down before it comes in, maybe give yourself a brush down, maybe change your clothes, maybe have a shower even. There's anything that's stopping that pollen getting into your eyes and into your nose, that's going to really reduce those symptoms.
Thunderstorms can also impact the severity of a person's response to pollen. There is ongoing research into the idea that thunderstorms can cause pollen particles to explode, generating a more extreme response from those that suffer from hay fever or have respiratory issues. Pollen is part of the natural cycle and creates the dazzling array of colour we see every year, but it can make some of us really suffer. But with these top tips, you may just about enjoy your spring days a little more.
Well, hopefully Kerry's enjoying a spring day off.
Let's hope so.
Hay fever free, fingers crossed. So here's Jo now with the weather.
Good visibility on the horizon. TUI sponsors ITV Yorkshire Weather.
Thank you. Very good evening to you. Some lovely sunshine for eastern parts of the region today. Many of us, though, have been under a little bit more cloud than we'd like. The good news is tomorrow should be dry and fine, with plenty more blue skies on offer for the whole of the region. There will be a cool breeze to contend with, just clipping temperatures a little bit, but it's staying largely fine and settled until this weekend. High pressure dominates, and the weather over the next few days across all of the UK will be quite quiet. At times it will be breezy. Temperature-wise, we're not doing too badly for the time of year, but there will be a cool breeze certainly tomorrow. And then just pushing in later on in the week from the west, fronts and low pressure once again from the Atlantic, unsettling things into the weekend. But back to this evening, a lovely quiet end to the day, and under clear skies initially some mistiness developing, a little bit of cloud around overnight tonight, and it should stay dry across the board. Winds are just moving round to a slight northerly by the time we get to tomorrow morning, and that's going to clip those temperatures a little tomorrow. But tonight we tend to be free from frost, 4 or 5 Celsius for rural parts of North Yorkshire, the Dales and the Pennines. On to tomorrow. First of all, the sun times, and it'll be up at 6 o'clock, setting tomorrow evening at 13 minutes past 8. Not a bad start to the day tomorrow at all. There may be some mistiness and perhaps some fog for Transpennine routes initially, but very quickly sunshine will get out across the whole of the region and it will be a dry day. Into the afternoon, plenty of sunshine, quite a cool breeze, so it will feel very cool, particularly along the coast. Inland temperatures could get to around 14 Celsius, so don't be deceived by the sunshine. You'll certainly need a coat tomorrow.
TUI sponsors ITV Yorkshire Weather.
Thanks very much, Joe. The national and international stories are coming up next with Mary Nightingale.
That's it for now, though. I'll be back with the late news this evening at 10:30. Thanks very much indeed for watching, though. We'll see you later on. Bye-bye.
Have a good evening.